Hello, and welcome to our 2017 HUD HMIS Data Standards Changes webinar. We will be discussing the data standards changes that go into effect October 1st, 2017. First of all, what are data standards? Data standards are all of the data elements that we collect in HMIS as part of our program enrollments, services, and exits. These include the universal data elements that you see on the screen, which are collected by all programs in HMIS. The program-specific data elements, which are listed, some of which are listed here, which are commonly collected by programs that are participating in HMIS. And then our federal partner program data elements as well. This is just a short list of some of the elements that our federal partners ask us to collect in HMIS as well for programs that are funded by these partners. As I mentioned, the new data standards will go into effect October 1st, 2017. Currently, the changes are happening behind the scenes as BitFocus prepares to release these new standards in Clarity Human Services. Some changes you'll start to see early, particularly drop-down menu options that are just wording changes, but the remainder of the changes will go into effect October 1st, 2017. That date is on a weekend, so you can expect that you'll see the old data standards when you leave work on the 29th, and then when you return on October 2nd, the new changes will be in effect. If after this webinar you have questions about any of the changes that I've described in this webinar, you can refer to the 2017 Data Standards Manual, which I have a link to on this slide. You can always contact our help desk at kcsupport@bitfocus.com or by phone at 206-444-4001 extension 2. And we'll be offering a couple of office hours sessions that are focused specifically on the data standards changes. Of course, office hours are an opportunity to ask questions about anything related to HMIS, and we welcome all of your questions. These two upcoming sessions will be focused specifically around data standards changes and any questions related to those. Those will be taking place on September 13th from 9:30 to 11 a.m. and September 26th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. The email that you received when you received the link to this recording includes sign-up information for those webinars, or for those office hours. But if you don't have that information, you can contact the help desk and ask them to connect you with the registration info. So first, we're going to start about the changes. First, we're going to talk about the changes that take effect in general to HMIS. These are changes that everybody will see when they're using HMIS, regardless of the program type, because these are changes to either the common program-specific data elements or changes to the universal data elements. So we're going to start with the enrollment screen and the changes you'll see there. So the first change is around housing status, which is an element that's currently collected, and that element is going to be removed. It was collected at enrollment. It will no longer show up on the enrollment screen, and instead, homeless status will be determined by the living situation section of questions, which you can see on the center, or near the center of the image on this slide. Since housing status potentially duplicates or even conflicts with information collected in living situation, it makes more sense to get rid of that question and to only focus on the living situation questions, which is the decision that HUD made. Another change is that there's been a revision to the disabling conditions and barriers section. Currently, when you answer yes to questions about clients' disabling conditions, you are prompted to answer two additional questions about whether the client is receiving services related to that disability or whether that disability has been documented. Those follow-up questions are being removed. They will no longer be asked. So you can see here there's a list of which questions currently have those follow-up questions, and then after October 1st, you'll no longer see those questions, which will hopefully make it a little more efficient to answer these questions for your clients. The next change is one of the biggest changes to the 2017 data standards, and that is the addition of a move-in date field for all permanent housing projects. Currently, this element is collected for rapid rehousing projects only, so that folks can indicate when a client enrolls in rapid rehousing and then also when they actually move into housing. But as of October 1st, it's going to be used for all permanent housing projects. So this field will be used to indicate the date a client actually moves into the project, regardless of when services started. So some projects may start serving clients before they actually move into the project, in which case the day that you start serving clients will now be your enrollment date, and the day that they actually move into your project will be the move-in date field that you'll enter. For some permanent housing projects, these fields might be the same. You may not serve clients before they move into your project. But for many projects, especially those participating in coordinated entry, once you receive a referral for a client, you may start to do work with that client, reaching out to them and coordinating with them around accepting the referral into your project. And this is a way that you can document that work by entering an enrollment date of the date that you start actually working with them, and then a move-in date of the date that they actually move into your project. This move-in date element can be entered at entry, update, or exit. So you can enter it when you're enrolling them, if you know the move-in date then, if it happens to maybe be the same as the enrollment date, or later you can add a status update to enter it, or you can enter it when they exit. In King County, we may actually be rolling out this move-in date field as a means for tracking housing outcomes for all project types, not just permanent housing. That discussion is in the works, and you'll be hearing more about that soon. Once we do implement it, this will be a way for all projects to indicate housing outcomes, which can be useful for day shelters or for services-only projects that want to indicate that their clients have moved into housing, but not exit those clients because they will continue to serve them. So you can expect to hear more about that element soon. Now we're going to talk about HMIS changes related to services. There's only one change related to services in this set of data standards changes, and it may not impact everyone. The contact element is being changed. As you can see on the right side of the slide, that is the current outreach contact service element, and those are the options when providing services to clients. Those options are being replaced with just one question: staying on streets, emergency shelter, or safe haven, with the answers of no, yes, or worker unable to determine. You may or may not enter contacts for your programs depending on the type of program. This element is really only used by outreach programs, including PATH projects, and then ESG-funded night-by-night shelters. So if you are not representing one of those projects, you may not use this contact element, but if you are, then you'll see this change when the data standards go into effect, and you'll enter it when you're entering services for your clients. There are a few small wording changes that are happening in HMIS that I wanted to be sure to cover. I won't go into them into great detail. Feel free to pause the webinar and read them at length, but there are some changes to gender, to project start, status, and end date. In Clarity Human Services, those are currently listed as program start date, program status date, and program end date, and we're changing the language to project, which is a change that HUD is requiring. And then there are a couple of wording changes related to a couple of options under destination and/or type of residence immediately prior to enrollment. And those are just small changes that I've listed out here. There are a couple of additional changes, one to income and sources, and then a couple of options that have been removed from non-cash benefits. These are really mostly just language changes, except for these two elements that have been removed. Next, I'm going to talk about changes for youth and young adult programs. These are described in the data standards as RIE changes to RIE-funded programs. But in King County, we collect the RIE data elements for all youth and young adult programs, whether or not they receive RIE funding. So these changes actually impact all youth and young adult programs, not just RIE-funded programs. So if you are representing a youth and young adult program, be sure to pay attention to these changes. We're going to start by discussing changes to the enrollment screen. Currently, there are two sections on the enrollment screen, young person's critical issues and family members' critical issues. These elements have been streamlined. The young person's critical issues section has been removed, and the family member critical issues section has been reduced to just the elements listed there on the screen, and they're also the ones that are highlighted in green in the image on the right. Excuse me, the image on the left. Referral source has also been revised. As you can see by the image, in the image on the right, there's a very lengthy list of referral sources that are currently collected. That response list is being streamlined to just the options that you see on the left side of the slide. Additionally, there are some revisions to commercial sexual exploitation / sex trafficking and labor exploitation / trafficking. These elements are no longer collected on the enrollment screen. They're going to be captured at exit instead. And then there's just a slight naming change to those elements. Next, we're going to talk about RIE service changes. Now, I mentioned that RIE changes impact all youth and young adult programs because we collect all of the RIE elements for youth and young adult programs. The one exception is services. If you have a youth and young adult program that is not RIE funded, you do not collect RIE services. However, if you have a program that is RIE funded, then you will want to pay attention to the changes to the RIE services. The first change is a pretty big one. The RIE service connections options, which you can see a partial list of in the image on the right side of the slide, has been reduced significantly. They've removed many of the options from the list, which you can see there on the left side of the screen. They've renamed several of the elements, and then, excuse me, then they've added a handful of new elements as well. So that's a pretty substantial change. You'll see that the list will shift accordingly. Hopefully this streamlines the options and makes it easier to track services for clients who are participating in RIE-funded programs. The next element is one that's been removed. Referral provided, which is another RIE service element, that has been removed. All RIE referrals are being retired. So that is another long section of options under RIE services, and those will be going away. The next changes are changes to the RIE exit screens. And again, these are changes that impact all youth and young adult programs in King County, not just those that are RIE funded. So the first change is to the project completion status element. Previously, there was an option about voluntary completion of the program and involuntary completion of the program. The voluntary status follow-up questions have been removed. Previously, if you selected one of the voluntary option, you were prompted with a follow-up question. That question has been retired and will no longer be part of this. You will still be prompted, however, if you select the involuntary option, you'll still be prompted to select another reason for that involuntary completion status. And then family reunification achieved, that element has been removed. A couple of additional changes. Last grade completed school status and employment status are now collected both at enrollment and at exit. They were previously only collected at enrollment, but now they're collected at exit as well. And as I mentioned previously, commercial sexual exploitation / sex trafficking and labor exploitation / trafficking are now collected at exit instead of being collected at enrollment. They'll no longer show up on the enrollment screen and will only be collected at exit. There are also a few new elements on the RIE exit screen. The first one is counseling. And you can see these are the options that will be, the questions that will be asked in that section. The next one is safe and appropriate exit. And again, these are the questions that will be asked in this section. And then the last one is a new section called aftercare plan. The first two bullet points describe the questions that will be asked, and then the last one talks about the circumstances in which this information will be entered. This information will show up on the exit screen. However, it's information that you'll come back and enter after a client has exited once you have followed through with their aftercare plan. So this element will be editable for up to 180 days after an exit, and then after those 180 days, you'll no longer be able to edit this element. So next, we're going to talk about SSVF and VASH changes. And again, we're going to start with the enrollment screen. So there's a revision to the VAMC station number. Previously, this was a text field that you could enter anything into. Now it's going to be replaced with a drop-down menu so that you can select one of the options, an existing VAMC station number. The existing values that you've been tracking in HMIS will be mapped to these drop-down values. In some cases, it may not be clear to us what station number was being tracked, and so we'll follow up with your agency if we have questions about that. But otherwise, the mapping should happen automatically, and so that old data will be stored, and moving forward, you can just select the new option from a drop-down menu instead of having to write it in. The user of other crisis services section has been removed. That section is being retired, so you'll no longer see that on the exit form. And then there's another new element, connection with SOAR. Previously, this was required only for PATH programs. Now it's going to be required for SSVF as well. And this element is collected at enrollment, at annual or status update, if you are required to complete those, and then again at exit. There are also some SSVF and VASH changes to services. Actually, there's just one, which is this new element, HUD-VASH voucher tracking. The question will be voucher change, and these are the options that you'll be able to select under that question. And again, this will be a service that'll show up under the options for providing services once they're enrolled, providing services once clients are enrolled in your program. Then the last section that we're going to discuss is SSVF and VASH changes to the exit screen. There's a new element, HUD-VASH exit information. The question will be case management exit reason, and then these will be the options under that question, and this again will show up on the exit screen. That covers all of the changes that will go into effect on the as of October 1st in HMIS. If you have any questions about these changes, again, please feel free to check out the HUD 2017 Data Standards Manual, and you see the link there on the screen. And again, it will also be, the link will be available in the email that you received with the link to this recording. You can contact the help desk always with any questions related to this or anything else about HMIS at kcsupport@bitfocus.com or by phone at 206-444-4001 extension 2. And again, we'll be having 2 upcoming office hour sections focused on data standards changes. The first one will be September 13th from 9:30 to 11. The second one will be September 26th from 2 to 3:30. You will have registration information in that email that you received. And if you don't have that information, please feel free to contact the help desk and they will make sure to get you set up. That concludes this webinar on data standards changes. Thank you very much for your time.